Hello and well met. This is Layron with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to be doing something a little different. Typically I'm working mostly in Fantasy Grounds, but today I'm going to be working mostly in Canva. And the topic for today or this evening is overlay assets for OBS and for streaming. So I know a lot of you would probably like to stream. You might be a little intimidated, or perhaps you don't feel like you're good enough or prepared enough, whatever it may be. I assure you that it just takes a little practice and it takes some time. I'm not going to go through the entire process of setting up your own stream because everyone uses different equipment, different software, and they have different capabilities. So it's really hard to make a comprehensive video to help a majority of the fans, but I am going to dive more into the creative aspects of it. And today the music I'm playing in the background is brought to us by Monument Studios. The name of this sound pack is The Occult Forces, and it's kind of a modern horror music for D&D and for other types of games such as Call of Cthulhu and other horror games. Maybe you'd use it during Curse of Strahd, whatever it may be. So maybe it's an alternative to some of the other audio solutions that are out there. But nonetheless, I'm going to go to my favorite tool that I use for social media, for putting together things, and for creating content to use for gaming. So this is essentially a paid version of Canva. There is a free version, but it's rather limited, and you don't have access to a lot of the elements and the tools that are in it. So I wanted you to know that up front. Some of the other tools I use are like GIMP. I use a bunch of stuff. GIMP's free, actually. And then I use Notepad++ to curate text. And then, of course, Fantasy Grounds and things like that. So we're going to mostly work in Canva today. And tomorrow I'm going to do a stream about these two sisters that are basically, they're magic users, or they delve in magic. And essentially there's a whole backstory on it, but I'm making a theme overlay for them, and I'm kind of checking out different things. So I generated some content using ChatGPT, and then I ran it through some filters and also did some embellishments. So I'm kind of looking for this macabre, kind of strange, kind of necromancy slash dark evil magic, and I think I'm kind of set on this one because I want the skulls in the background. So I wanted to show you some things you can do with Canva that's kind of interesting. So this image here has already kind of been rendered as one individual piece. So let me get my pointer out here so you guys can see what I'm pointing at. And I want to kind of go over some of the creative processes that you might employ to help you create your own. So what I'm doing today is going to be going over some artistic type things to go over and make overlays, or this can even be a wallpaper for your game. So it just depends on what your needs are. I'm going to turn the audio down a little bit so it's not overwhelming for the music, and let's get into this. So this is one big image that I created in an app like ChatGPT. So I had it render some stuff for me. And what I'm doing is creating content for tomorrow, which is going to be a stream about these NPCs. There's two sisters, and they're basically tied together through magic, and their father was actually a wizard. Mara here is a sorceress from dark magic, and then her older sister is a couple years older. This is Verena, and she is a warlock, or like a witch, and she has a patron that's essentially like a fiend, like her mother. They both share the same father. They have different mothers, so there's a whole story behind that. I'll get into that tomorrow, but I just kind of wanted you to see what the premise of this was for. So that's why I got all these dark images. So if you are someone who doesn't like dark, evil stuff, then don't watch. But this is just a kind of a more of a thing about Canva and how to incorporate, you know, artistic stuff and, you know, generating content for perhaps you want to make a background or a decal or something like that. So this is basically just a preliminary start on this. I think I'm going to go with this image down below here. And I would really like is the skulls more than anything, because when I make the overlay, this edge here is what I want to show more than the center, because this is all going to be blocked out. So I'm looking more at doing this, like I want more of these skulls in here. So this image here is essentially a mirror image of this one up here. So you can do stuff like that in Canva now. If you want to, you can take this image here and you can you can cut whatever pieces of it out that you don't want. Maybe it's just that. And then what you can do with this is you can make a duplicate and reverse it. So what I might do is like center this piece here somewhere. I got to find center. Maybe you want it there, whatever. But I want this piece to be on the outside, so I don't want to center it right there. But maybe I'm going to do it right here. So this is centered as far as offset to this. Now what I'm going to do is actually make a copy of this image and reverse it. So if I just take this image and use this little plus button down here to duplicate it, now I have another image. So now I just rotate it. I'm going to actually just flip it. So there's a button here that allows you to flip the image. So I'm going to flip it horizontally, and you could do something like that. So this could be a way to kind of extend your image. And the thing I'm really wanting, to be honest with you, is this stuff here, this stuff on the edge. So I'm going to pull those over like that. And now you see I have this kind of this mess in the center. So I'm going to actually bring this to the halfway point. If it'll, I don't know if it'll let me find it. Let me first do this and then. So essentially what I want to do is drag this to the center. Okay, so maybe that's center. But I want to make sure that I want the skulls the most. So I don't want to mess with that too much. But playing with this center piece is probably going to be the most difficult part. So maybe like that, and bring this one over. So that's what I'm trying to do, is kind of butt these up so that they have the center point. So that looks pretty close. So that's kind of like the center, and then this is the pieces that I want to keep. So all that was an image that I flipped over to mirror image. And really the main thing I want out of this is the colors, obviously, and these skulls on the edge. And these are optional, these NPCs down here. Those can be rather distracting, so I can get rid of these. They're just there for kind of for placement reasons and to get an idea of how I want to design the overlay. So this will be the background, like the wallpaper for the overlay. And I'm going to take this panel right here and send it back. So when I go to position, I can send that backwards and bring out this NPC. This is the other sister. So I'll put them right here in the center for now, since I really don't know where they're going to go, or even if I'm going to include them. I'm just kind of doing it for kind of embellishments and kind of getting used to how I want to do this. So for the colors, I'm going to use some lines here and some squares and stuff to block out an area that I want for displaying the Fantasy Grounds platform, or whatever platform you're going to use. So these two individuals are NPCs in the game. I thought it would be kind of cool to include them in the overlay, but I don't want them to stand out to where it's going to be too distracting, so I don't know if I'm going to use them. But I did put some transparency on them, so they have a little bit of transparency so you can see a little bit of the background behind them and kind of blend them in with the image, so they're not just popping out. So that's kind of another trick you can use to help make this come to life and kind of look cooler. So the next thing I'm going to do is take and add a big block here and figure out where exactly I want Fantasy Grounds to stand. So I'm going to go ahead and use a square shape, and I don't care what color it is, but I usually use white or black depending on the scenario here. And then what I do is I'll just take this piece and kind of get an idea of where I want Fantasy Grounds to show up in regards to the overall placement. So this would be something like that. And then when you have Fantasy Grounds up, you can kind of play with the sizing and get an idea of what scale you're going to need to make for your project. So you might need it to sit in a certain spot. You can cut out places, like you don't need to necessarily have every single square inch of that thing set in that place, so you can do whatever you want in regards to placement. So let me see if I can. I'm trying to get this bottom corner. It's not it's not exactly, but anyways, you get it. You'll have an idea of the type of, yeah, see, it's docking the windows. I don't want it to do that. I want it more free floating. I don't know why it keeps doing that, but it's trying to expand or fill in. But anyways, you'll get the idea of kind of like where exactly what size you want Fantasy Grounds, so that you can kind of size up that window. I usually kind of wing it, but this is generally about the dimensions. You can do this however you want. You can divide this into pieces so you can have more of the theme showing. I kind of like to have Fantasy Grounds showing more, because I notice a lot of streams when people are doing those, you see a few faces, and then you might see the combat tracker, which is okay. It depends on the type of broadcast and type of streaming that you want to do. But in this case, I want to show Fantasy Grounds more than people's faces. I don't necessarily need to have the entirety of the theme back here shown, but if I want to, I can kind of change the sizing around and figure out how much of this top part, how much of these sides I want. And then I leave a little room over here for, advertising, or maybe this will be where one of these NPCs ends up. It just depends. So I might use this individual here, and then bring this out. So positioning, I can bring this forward or backwards. In this case, it'll be forward. And then same thing with the sister. If I wanted to, I can bring her out too. So I'm just bringing that layer forward to kind of fill in these corners, and then maybe make them a little smaller so they're not too big. And then the other thing is, I might want to put like the Fantasy Grounds logo or whatever logo you want there. So I might put her there and put her sister right there to balance it out. And then that's probably about the extent of using those particular characters. And then down here will be for the title. Whatever you want to put for your title, or maybe you want the name of the game or the name of your group or whatever it might be. Then over here on the left, this is going to be for logos, symbols, that sort of thing. So my biggest thing is trying to get this margin kind of the same size on this left and bottom, and then the top and the right the same size. They're thinner, but I'm trying to optimize the space as much as possible for Fantasy Grounds, because when I'm done with this, I'm going to be cutting this center out and then using that as my cutout, and then I'll overlay that on top of Fantasy Grounds. So we'll see how it goes, but it is what it is. So I'm going to put another square in here. So I'm just going to make another copy of this square, and I'm going to go and change the color of it to like purple. So the way this works is over here, there's some colors that already come from the background that comes from this image. So I might use those, or you can use this color picker, and you can come in and go, okay, I want to choose a color from this background. So you can kind of go through these and figure out, maybe you want one of these purple colors from the background. So that'll help you determine, like, what colors you want to use. So maybe that. This comes from the image, so it helps theme it. So then what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to slightly adjust this a little, and that's going to help me make a frame that I'm going to be using for reference, so that when I'm setting up this stream and making everything kind of cohesive here, I want this to be part of the border. So I will use that as my border and kind of get an idea what it's going to look like in contrast with the background. So that may be too much or too little. So you might want to lighten it up a little, you know, maybe you want this to be a little lighter so it pops. We'll see. But you get the idea that you can do this. Maybe I'll change the color to something a little lighter. So that might be a thing. So if I go into this color area and go back to this adjustment here, maybe I can kind of lighten it up a little. You know, just do something like that. And then these skulls here, I'll incorporate something like these into the design later. But for now, I just want to get this laid out before I add anything else, because I want to know where my borders are going to be, those sort of things. So now I'm going to send this image backwards, since I already have an idea of the color I want to use. And it looks like I have it sized fairly close to where I want it to go. And so what I'm going to do is take this block and send it backwards. So I'm going to take this, go to position, send that one backwards, and then take this white one and kind of make this one smaller, and that's going to form the border that I want. And then what I might do is take some lines or something and put those along the edges, but that's going to be the border essentially. And then this is going to be just the filler that I'm going to remove. So this white is all going to come out. So that's going to be basically the piece that comes out of this. So now what I'm going to do is take another image like this big block here, make another copy of it, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel, and change this back one to black. But first I want to make sure that I make a copy of this one first. I'm trying to be efficient, but at the same time creative. It's a fine balance, and sometimes you do all this and it doesn't work out. You're like, damn, that was a waste of 2 hours. But you know, most of the time it works pretty good once you get a methodology, once you get familiar with the tools, that sort of thing. So I kind of want to explore that with you. So I'm going to expand that a little bit more so you can see what I'm doing. If you guys are having problems seeing, let me know. I have it broadcasting at 2K, so it should be fairly decent if you're looking at this on a good device. So this is just going to be for making the overlay. That's what I'm working on right now. So this is basically the type of, basically this little edge out here is going to be one of my borders. And then I'm going to have a black border too, or maybe gray, something like that. So go ahead and make the copy, put this in its place. And then this one here is going to be a different color. So I want to go with maybe one of these gray colors instead of black. So let's see what that looks like. What did we do here? Oh, okay. So I want this to be gray. There we go. So that's going to be part of the border. And then this cutout is going to be there as a remainder. So that is basically how this is going to work. Okay, so now they have that. Now I get to decide how much of that gray I want to show. So maybe not, I want this area, this purple, to be a little bit more, you know, more prominent. And then this thing here, I'll move this aside. And what I want to do is center this so that it kind of balances out, and so that we get a railing or our edge, if you want to call it, or border, however you want to call it. I find that a solid border works better. I don't know why. I've tried to use textured ones like chains and, you know, different embellished ones. I used one that was all like little skulls. It looked kind of cool, but it's distracting and it doesn't quite do the trick for a border. Now, if you overlay it on top of a solid thing and add a little transparency, that might be a thing. But as far as the overall aesthetic and what it looks like and how it shows up on screen, because that's another thing, is you make these elements too small, they're not going to be visible. So that's the other thing, is a balance between sizing and, you know, what exactly you want shown on your screen. So this is just a way to kind of get everything kind of situated. And then also I'm going to have this kind of light gray kind of border here, and that's going to, or kind of a medium gray, and that's going to help accentuate the purple that surrounds it. So it kind of draws the attention to it. And you'd think that all this fussing around for just these little things isn't it shouldn't be that big of a deal, but it really is. This is the what kind of makes or breaks the setup or the image, because if you don't have the right borders and you have all this other crap, it's really gonna detract from what you're trying to show. And that's the other thing, is like you're theming colors and design and elements, music. I mean, it's a whole thing if you really want your stream to look kind of decent. I'm not an expert at this. I've just been kind of messing with this for a couple of years. There are people out there that are way more talented than me that know 10 times more than I do. But I'm just trying to show you a way that you can make your own overlay. That's kind of what the focus is here. So I'm going to bring this character forward again, since she's buried behind all that stuff, and bring her sister forward. Okay, so that's essentially what that's going to be like. So I don't want to build too much more on top of that. So I might render this and actually create it as a separate image so I can get a better idea of how I want to do this. And I might just even cancel these two things out, because I want a blank slate in case I want to change things up. If you bake everything into it now, you're going to have a lot less flexibility later, because you can always add those extras through OBS if you want to. But if you want to save on memory and how much streaming is being done, your bandwidth, then you're going to want to bake it into the image. But if you've got a lot of bandwidth and you're not worried about your computer freezing up or OBS being overly taxed, then you can add elements in OBS instead of baking those into this background. The other thing I might do later is put like a Fantasy Grounds logo here, maybe a purple one or something to kind of go with the theme. We'll see. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit this share, and I'm going to go to download, and I would do a transparent background if I had any. In this case, I don't yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and render all three of these pages, because I might use these for something else, like a regular wallpaper for my computer or whatever. So, and this is also, I think it's 2460 by, or 2560 by 1440, which is a 2K resolution. So I can use this in a regular HD, or I can resize it, size it down. But you want to start with a bigger image and then shrink down if you have to. If you have a small image and you want to go bigger, it's harder and it distorts the image. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the downloads, and it's going to download these images as individual images instead of pieces of it, because I want to be able to kind of just add this as a solid piece, and then I don't have to worry about accidentally moving the other pieces. And I've done that where I've had a project going and then I accidentally bump something or whatever. There's an undo button up here, but there's been times where I didn't notice it until after I get ready to render it. So that's kind of annoying. But anyways, you can lock too. There's ways to lock the images. So I want to see if these actually turned out right. See what they look like in a different environment. So I might open those up, and use them for kind of a comparison, see what it looks like on my computer, instead of just looking at everything through the same medium. So do I have those images? Hello, where are you at? Huh, maybe they went to a different folder. Oh, wonderful. So downloads, nope. Maybe they downloaded as a single image. That's one thing I always fight with, is I always forget where the heck I downloaded this stuff to. So download, okay, let's try this. So instead of doing all 4 of those, I'm just going to do this first one. That might be useful, because I think what it does is it compresses it to a zip file. Oh, I see, it was in my download queue and I didn't hit go. So that's what it was. All right, so yeah, I'm confusing the hell out of myself like normal. Okay, so this is basically just kind of the preliminary steps of getting this stuff, to work for you. it can be a lot of work, and it can be super annoying. So just kind of keep that in mind. I often make more work for myself than it's worth, and that sucks. So you got to kind of stop doing that to yourself. Is that's I usually struggle with that as I'm doing a live show. If I'm not paying attention to where the stuff is and where it's going, and the format and all that stuff, the sizing, and you can get sidetracked pretty quick. So when I'm doing this without showing it and just kind of doing my own thing, it goes really good. But when I'm trying to multitask, which I'm not very good at doing, it can be problematic sometimes. So this is the image rendered, and I wanted to look at it in a different light too. So instead of just in that particular thing, I wanted to look at it from my computer. Just open it straight up and see how it renders on my screen, because that's another test you can do before you run with it. So other overlays. Okay. Oh, it's still thinking. So that's another thing, is when you got all this stuff like I got over here, that can be problematic too, because then your computer is having a hard time indexing all that stuff. And that's kind of what happens in Fantasy Grounds. So that looks pretty good. It's bright, but it looks good. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to right click, and I'm going to open this up with GIMP, because I'm going to take that center piece out. I can do it in Canva, but I prefer to do it here because it does a little bit better job. So this is the image, and then I'm going to go to layer, and you want to make sure it has a transparency layer. So I'll go to transparency, and you would add an alpha channel if you didn't have one. This one already has it because it was rendered as a PNG file. And then what I'll do is I'll take this fuzzy selection tool. I have the threshold up to like 40%. That's like the sensitivity of how much it's going to remove, or how much of the color it's going to consider. So I'm going to hit delete there, and that should take out a majority. Yeah, so that took out that center. So you'll have a transparent center that you can put over for your overlay. So that's what the whole thing was, just for that. And then export it or overwrite. So I'm going to export this. And being that it's a pretty good size file, I'm actually going to first give it a name. So I'll call this is the Necro Sisters, is what I call this series, which I'm going to do tomorrow, by the way. And I'll use the overlay and everything else. So Necro Sisters underscore, we'll say overlay dot web p. Because that's going to change the file size a lot. It's going to compress it down. I'll show you that in a sec. So that's that. It's going to go to the downloads folder, which is fine. And I want to put underscore. So the Necro Sisters underscore overlay web p. All right, so I hit export. In this case, I'm not going to mess with the quality. I want it at 100%, but when you're using Fantasy Grounds, you can play with that percentage. They recommend using 75. I don't really need to do that. This is just for the overlay. I want it at 100% image quality. So I'm going to go ahead and hit export. It's going to render that as a WebP version, transparency, a whole 9 yards. And technically, there is the overlay here. And what I'm going to do is actually make another page here. And that's going to be the master. And then these are kind of like the mock-ups. So this is going to be where the actual image is. I'm going to go ahead and shut down this for now. I don't need it. So I'm going to preserve my memory. I don't want to have 50 things open. And as a matter of fact, I want to make sure, I don't have Discord open either, because that can really suck up resources when you don't need it to. And then I'm going to close Fantasy Grounds right now. I'm not going to work in Fantasy Grounds. I have the media player playing right now, playing music in the background for mood music. I have a web browser open, which is what this is in. And then I have OBS, and then I have my had the editing software. So if you got too many things going on, if you're using Fantasy Grounds, that's another thing you got to be wary of. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is drag that image from here. This is the WebP. So this thing is 200 kilobytes. If I hadn't done all that work to it, this thing would be 843 kilobytes. So there's a difference there. That isn't a whole lot of difference. It probably wouldn't make that big of a difference in regards to that, but nonetheless. So this is just a preliminary kind of look at this, and this looks pretty good. I don't know about you all, but kind of weird though that it rendered it this way, but oh well. All right, so there we go. So I don't know what you guys think, but I think it looks okay. Not too bad. Now, if I want to lighten and darken this, I could do that. So I might darken it or lighten it depending on what it looks like. I think it's pretty well balanced. It is kind of on the dark side. So I can go to this photo editing tool. You know, you can change the mood of it. I like to adjust, so there's an adjustment here. So I might change the temperature a little bit, turn up the brightness just a hair. So you can go all the way bright, but I don't want to do that. I just wanted to bring it up just a hair. There's a little tiny bit of contrast in it. Bring up some of the whites a little. And dial back a little bit of the blacks, and maybe put the sharpness up just a hair. So you kind of get, you can kind of see the detail a little bit more. It's not so faded into the background. And that could have been done before. So even before I started this, you know, I could have done that. But now I'm kind of doing the overall look. So I'm going to adjust it all together kind of thing. All right, so that's that. And then what I want to do is take and start adding the other assets that I had earlier. So I had, let's see, that's the upload. So this was one of the sisters, and this is the other. So these were generated with ChatGPT, and then I'm just gonna add these in as I see fit. And one of the things that I did in the other picture was I just kind of cut this out. You know, I could do that and then take this editing process here, and you can actually remove the background out of this. You can do that ahead of time. So this is something that you can do in Canva, the paid version. I don't know what its limitations are, but that's essentially what it is that. And then what I can do is shrink this down and put her over here in the corner. It's kind of where I had her before. I don't want too much of the character blocking Fantasy Grounds, so that's why I'm kind of making them smaller, so they're more of a decoration than the actual focus. That's kind of what I like to do with these. And now to make them pop a little bit more, I might go in and add shadow. So you can add a glow to them, and then what I'll do is I'll take this thing here and I'll kind of make this purplish glow on them so they kind of pop a little bit better. And you can't really see it that well because I don't have the size up, but if you dial this in, you can kind of see it a little bit more. So I might go to like 33%, 34, unblur it a little so that it's not too blurry, and then the intensity, kind of back that off so it's not too banging or too crazy. So that's basically how I kind of dial these in, so you can see them better, and they kind of have a little bit of contrast around them so they can kind of see a little bit better, because they tend to blend in with the background too much. Now this one looks a lot brighter, so when I bring these two side by side, since they weren't rendered in the same photo, they look totally different. So I want to fix that a little bit. So what I can do with this image before I do anything else to it is, again, I'm just going to edit the photo, and I will play around with the settings so that I can adjust to kind of make that darker. So I might back off a little bit, back off the brightness a hair, turn up the contrast a little, turn up the shadows, turn down the whites, turn up the black. You know, you do all these things here to kind of help make it blend a little better. And then here's some sharpness to it. And then I might do the same to her, give her a little bit of sharpness, take out a little bit of the white since she has kind of a pale skin. There we go. So that kind of helps balance these out so they don't look quite as different, and they still kind of have that quality of, they blend in with the background, but they're still visible. And then, of course, I'm going to do the shadows. I'm going to do the glow. Again, I'm just going to change the color to like this purplish kind of color. Make it a little bit brighter. Turn it up a hair to like 30, I think it was. And you'll get used to how much is too much and that sort of stuff. Turn the blur down a little bit. So this kind of gives you a starting point, kind of like where you might want to decorate this. So these are now permanent. So if I wanted these to be separate assets that I could move in and out, I'll either render the basic background and put these in separately in OBS, or include them, in which that will cut down a lot on the memory that's being broadcasted, because it takes a lot more if you've got separate assets in OBS instead of one big picture. So it kind of depends on what you're doing. But there I go. I tried to move the background again. Didn't want to do that. I forget how you lock. There we go. Lock. Lock position only. There. Now I can't accidentally move that background anymore. That is annoying. Okay, so that's that. Now, if you've used Canva before, you can make kind of like a branding kit. So this might be helpful if you're a streamer or a publisher or whatever. You may want to build your own brand. So for instance, I have a fantasy font brand, but I have a brand for Fantasy Grounds Academy. I have one for Smiteworks and for different projects. What that does is it gives you the colors, the fonts that you want to use, and the logos. So it kind of collects them together, and it also helps you theme your project. So I don't know if I want to use this dark purple logo, but it looks pretty cool. And then maybe not, maybe this one. I don't know. What do you guys think? Light one or the dark one? Or should I adjust it? Because that does kind of make a difference. Maybe this lighter one so we can see it better. It kind of goes with the colors that are there, but it kind of can get washed out, or it might look too bright. So it depends on what you're doing here. But this is just for the branding, for logo. It doesn't have to be Smiteworks. It can be whatever symbol you want. But that's basically how I make these. Is I'll always put that on the bottom left corner as just kind of like a thing to do, like a common practice. And I always know where to put it. I mean, I could put it up here on the top left and save that for something cooler, but I don't know. I want it to kind of stick out more, so I do that. So another thing I can do with these is click on this image here, edit photo, and you can go through and use these filters to kind of adjust this accordingly. So maybe you want it to look a little bit more washed out, or you can play with the shadows and stuff. I'm going to go ahead and add a shadow, this time an outline, and I might put just a black outline around it. And what that does is kind of adds this kind of black ring around it. And then I'll turn the intensity down to about 75 or so. So it's not too crazy. And then I'll turn down the thickness a touch. So instead of 25, now it's at 20. And then if you want to blur it a little, you can put a little bit of, just tiny bit of blur on it, so it kind of blends in more. And there we go. So what that does is it helps it kind of stand out against the background. If you really want it to stand out, use like gray or white, which I didn't really want to do that. I wanted it to be a little bit more sort of, blended in, but I also want to see the border a little bit. And then I'll move her over just a touch. Oh, it's not letting me. It's locked. Let me unlock it. Yeah. I wish I had done that. Oh well. Lock. It just Okay, well, I really can't move it now. Oh, well, it's staying. I'm not moving it. There we go. I'll move this instead. There we go. All right, so I'll do the same thing here. I'll lock this one. So I don't want it to move. Lock position only. Okay, so there we go. That's going to be the starting of this. Now, if you want to get fancier, you can put logos in here. So I'm going to switch my branding that I've got here. This stuff I use all the time. That's why I have this branding thing here. And what this does is you can upload, you know, the fonts you want to use, the colors, your project logos, anything that goes with your whatever you're working on. So this thing here, actually, I'm going to switch this over to, I just have a basic kind of theme here. Like this one's for Cyberpunk. I got different, like Baldur's Gate, you know, so you kind of have all the colors and all the logos and all, you know, all that stuff in one spot. That's kind of why I do that. And this is kind of a, so this is the Necro Sisters, so I'm going to change that. I don't know. I couldn't think of a better name for them, but this is basically their kind of like their call tag or their call sign or what they're known as a duo. The Necro Sisters. And of course I'm going to make that a lot bigger. So let's go with this and see what that looks like and stretch this out. And I don't necessarily like that font, but it's going to be kind of where I'm going to start. And what I'm going to do is change that font to a different font. I think I liked the Hellprint one, or there was one other that I really liked that kind of worked. Oh, there's Tower Runes, Smashed Wall. I think that's the one I liked. Let me look. Yeah, so a font makes the world of difference in this. It really does. If you're going to use signage or anything. Oh, here's the, we all know what that is. That might actually work. It's kind of got that gothic look. I mean, yeah, it's for Planescape, but you know what? This could be for Planescape. I don't care. But this is just a way to kind of, you know, get your ideas in. And I'm going to make sure that this is spaced correctly. So is that right? Yep. All right, so there we go, the Necro Sisters. So what we can do with this is do some interesting stuff with text. So Canva does have a pretty good suite of things you can do with text. So that's just kind of a plain thing there. But what I'm going to do is start adding some effects. So you can do an outline, which is something I usually do anyways, and I do like that gray. And then for the color in the center, you know, I don't want to use that purple because that's way too dark. But I might use a darker gray and then later on come back and use one of the other accent colors. So I'm just going to play around with colors until I get something that kind of pops. Like that doesn't quite look right. Like I might use an offset color or maybe just stick with a really light gray and then change the border to something else. That's probably what I'll do. So I'll leave that as gray. But the border is kind of a darker gray. So what I'll do with that is go back into the editing and change that so that I can, so here's the thickness. So I might turn the thickness up a little bit. And then, actually that's a little too much. It was at 50, now it's at 70%. And maybe that's too dark. Maybe I can get away with one of these purple colors. So you can actually do that same thing with color, and you can use the colors from this background if you want. So maybe I'll use something like that. Yeah, that's kind of a black gray color. It's not bad. Let me go over here, play around with that. So it's kind of this purplish color, but it's not. Let me see. I want to grab more of this stuff in the background. There we go. So that looks pretty good. I'm not going to say that's not bad. And then I'm going to turn the thickness down just a little bit more because it kind of crowds out the text. And I might even make that text bigger, but for the time being, it looks okay. So maybe something like that, so you can read it in the screen. Is that legible if anyone can read that? Is that too much? As you might want to offset it, like there's a little room here in case you want to put something here and a little room here. So I don't want to crowd that entire thing out. So maybe I will go down just a hair, so 88. There we go. And that kind of gives you a little bit of space in case you need to work with it. Now what I'm going to do is this text, I'm going to take, and when I highlight this text box, I'm able to do some other things with it. So what I could do is I can copy it or duplicate it. So I'm going to duplicate it. And then I'm going to change the settings on this. So I'll go back to the effects, and this time I'm just going to have like hollow text. You turn that thickness down and then use that as a way to kind of make this thing pop a little bit more. So there's that. I don't know if that's even visible. Yeah, I think it needs to come forward. No, it's there. It's just really hard to see. So what I need to do is figure out a different color for it. Let's see if that does it. Yeah, it kind of does. Like, you got this kind of like edge right here. So let's go back and let's try that. That's too bright. Kind of like that, kind of these colors here. Yeah, these are much better. They're much more blended in with the background. There we go. So you wouldn't think that that kind of thing would be that much effort, but there you go. And you can group those together. So now if I want to if I want to make this a group thing and drag it all at once instead of having to do each layer at a time, you can group layers together. It's pretty cool. All right, so right click, you can go to layer, and you can change, or you can show the layers up here where you can group them together, do all kinds of cool stuff. So that is that. So that's kind of how I do this, is kind of adding. Now I'm going to add a little bit of accents on here so that it looks a little bit more polished. So I'm going to go back to the elements, and there's this kind of misty smoke type stuff that might work. So like here's some mist. Now this is going to be very subtle. I don't want this to overwhelm the entire image, but I do want it to be there. So what I'll do is I'll place it there, and then what I'll do is I'll send it backwards. So, and then this part here, I guess I'll have to leave that, but you get the idea. And then what I'm going to do is positioning it. I'm going to go back. First I'm going to center it, then go all the way back to where it is almost covered. And then I'm going to go to this transparency thing and turn that way down. So now we don't have to worry about how that's going to impact the game or the look. And then if you want to, you can take this and black it back out with a panel. You don't have to worry about that. But that just kind of gives us this little misty kind of thing going on. It's really barely noticeable, but it does add something. I don't know what it is, some ambiance or whatever, but it adds to the overall feel. I've always kind of done that, sometimes overly so, but... And then like this thing here, this swirling bit of fog or mist or whatever, I might put that down here. I'm going to make it smaller. Put that behind the O. So it looks like this O is superimposed, like it's like kind of going over that, kind of giving it that embellished look that you're looking for. And then I want to do glowing magic. So these are kind of neat. Really like how these can add to this. So probably end up using these purplish looking ones, but you have like a variety of different magical, like these stars, and you got these little zaps and circles and all kinds of cool stuff. So what I might do is take like this swirl right here, or this dust, whatever appeals to you, and use that as kind of a, maybe this thing here coming off the bottom might be kind of cool. So like this here, maybe taking that and maybe putting that down here on the bottom here, so that it kind of gives it that polished look. And then I can turn down the transparency so that it's not quite, not quite as crazy. And then looking at it from here, oops, what did I do? Oh, here it is. Yeah, it looks okay. You can barely tell it's there, but it does add accents to the image, the overall feel of this. So like this thing here, we might use that in one of the corners, like maybe like over here. Wait, why is that? I think it's because I'm locking the map. Okay, so that, okay, there we go. So I might do something like that in the corner, just to add a little accent, and then of course I'll send it backwards so that it's not sitting over the top, that it's actually part of the background. So maybe something like that. So this is just kind of ways to make this more interesting and not so boring. And it, you're not really changing a whole lot. You're just kind of adding little little things to help, make this thing pop. Wonder if I can do something with this. This might be a little too much. Yeah, that's going to be too much. But you get the idea. Like, now let's go back to the skulls. I always like skulls. Those will help with this immensely. So there's a variety of assets that you can get for, see, like I like this little group of skulls right here, but I don't like that they're so cartoonish. I kind of like them to look a little bit more realistic. So maybe I just want a couple, like maybe I'll just take one skull and duplicate it. That's probably what I'll end up doing. Like I like stuff like this because it's really subtle and you can kind of fade it in the background and it's not, it's not ridiculous. Kind of like these in the background here. So I just kind of want to put a skull up here, maybe just a single one. So like this would look cool, and then obviously resize it, and then kind of fade it out so it's not so obvious. So maybe just take that and kind of blend that in, maybe not make it straight, maybe kind of sideways, and kind of make it look like it's part of the background and not so much, the main thing. And then, of course, fade that out a little bit more, and then maybe make a duplicate, and then take that duplicate and kind of make it smaller, and put it kind of next to it or something. You can do all kinds of cool stuff. Maybe change the angle on this one. And then do the same thing with this. So make another copy of this and then come down this way, a different angle. So you get the idea. And that'll kind of make that pop so it doesn't look so generic, so clunky. I think that's probably enough. Now this up here, this little top, I'll use probably OBS to put lettering up here. Maybe I'll put in some other stuff here, maybe some other text with OBS, but I think this will get the point across. So this is for the Necro Sisters for tomorrow, because I'm going to do that. I'll do all that in Fantasy Grounds. So you got stuff like that. And then this thing here, if you wanted to, let's say, I want to use this one, we'll say, or, one of these backgrounds for Fantasy Grounds, right? So this thing here, you could take this and you can actually go to, let's do tear. We want to do some page tears in here. So it looks like ripped paper. Take something like that. And what you can do is add that in as kind of your torn edges. And then I'll make a copy of this. and flip it upside down. So let me go to flip and flip that upside down like that. Maybe center that a little bit more, like this thing. Okay, that's center right there. Okay. And then I don't want to cover up too much of the image, so I just kind of want to have just the edges torn. And then take another copy of this, flip it 90 degrees. So flip this 90 degrees and put it over here. And then I can even move this down if I want. And then do the same thing, like make another copy of this and do a flip on it like that. Maybe that's not what I wanted. I wanted it to, wait, flip, not that way, but this way. There we go. Something like that. And then this way, you keep this image in here, but then you also have like these torn edges. So you don't have that really generic kind of, and then of course I can reposition this so that I get more of whatever it is you want out of this. So this looks pretty cool. But I'm gonna shrink it a little bit because I do want some of those skulls back. So I do want to do that. There we go. So you got some of the skulls in there, and this thing I can move up a little, and then this down a little, because I want to retain a little bit of the art. There we go. So this might be something you're going to put in. Hey Dan, what's up? So this might be something you want to put in the background in Fantasy Grounds. So what is this? This is image 3. So I'm going to call this Necro Sisters decal. So that way, you know, when I go to render it, I'll know what it is. So I'll go to there, go to download, go to just the images that I want to include. So what I'm going to do is do number 5 and number 3. And then hit done, hit download, and hopefully it'll send it to where I want it to go. All right, so that's basically the gist of that. So when I do the OBS overlay tomorrow, I'll be able to adjust that. Like I can do it now, but I don't want to mess with that right now. But you can set it up to where, you know, I can replace the overlay I have now that says Fantasy Grounds overlay. Yeah, just hanging out, ran some Starfinder today. Pretty cool. Right on. This might work good for Starfinder, but instead using a Starfield or something. Okay, so now that we have that, what I'm going to do is take a look at, did that come out properly? Where did it go? I think this is it. So let me extract all of those. Nope, not quite. I mean, it is those, but not that. So that's what I'm saying. Half the time I don't know where this stuff is going to go. What's this? Body. Yeah, that's it. So this is where they went. So extract all those. Okay. So this is the Necro Sister. So the kind of like the decal. So I'm going to open it with GIMP again. And I'm going to do the same treatment that I did earlier, is just take out this white stuff and then use this as my decal for the background. So take this and again, go to image, or excuse me, layer, and make sure there's a transparency layer. In this case there is, because it's a PNG file already. And then go to this fuzzy select tool. I'm going to turn up the threshold higher because I want it to take more of this stuff out. That's too high. I don't want it to take all this out, so let me back off on that. Let's try that. Nope, still too high. So the threshold determines how much of this stuff it's going to grab. Yeah, that's pretty good. I don't mind that. And I can come through and, you know, take out these little bits of clouds, but you don't want to take out all of it because it's gonna, you know, blend in with Fantasy Grounds. And I don't mind this little cutout here. It looks kind of cool. It kind of gives it more of that natural kind of blending. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Gives it that more of that kind of blended effect, and it doesn't look perfect. And that's kind of what we wanted, is kind of like this torn look. And now I'm going to go to File, Export As, and that's the decal. But again, I'm going to use WebP because it's going to be a lot smaller. And okay, so that'll export. In this case, I will go to 75% because this will be in Fantasy Grounds. And hit export, and it should take that. Now this is going to be a pretty big image. I don't recommend the size, probably maybe one class smaller than that. So if I go into Fantasy Grounds, usually when I'm playing around like this, I'll just make a whole new session. So I'll just create a 5e thing. So I'll just say 5e underscore Necro Sisters. And this is important that you name your stuff aptly, because if you just have campaign 1, 2, and 3, you're not going to know what it is. And then this is going to be the work folder. Okay, so this is not a play folder. And that's so that I know that this is where I was working and not necessarily running a game. Turned off the LAN. The only extensions that I recommend using, especially if you're just working, is maybe one of the font extensions, so like this font, and then whatever background, so, or the theme. So I'm going to use the dungeon theme. I think that would be aptly adequate for this. And that's kind of, you know, another thing you can do in Canva is to take a screenshot of the theme that you're using and incorporate that into the design that you're designing for this particular overlay. So maybe you want elements of the Fantasy Grounds theme to work with your overlay. So you can do stuff like that for texture, like if you want to grab, like maybe you want this stuff in the background here. You know, it kind of depends on, you know, what you're aiming to do. And then it also gives you the opportunity to play around with some of the elements. And I think if they made it to where skulls in the nebula, exactly, that'd be kind of cool. I think yeah, so this is kind of good. This kind of works. So I'm just going to set up this a whole new campaign. The only thing I usually load is the SRD if you're working with D&D 5e. I don't really load too much else because I don't need it. I just need it for testing and stuff. I don't really need all the rules and stuff. So I might play around with this, but what I'm going to do is bring in that decal and substitute this. And I don't know if it's going to clash, but you can take like a piece of like this background if you want. I was saying earlier, and you could capture, like, let's just say like this, you want to capture that region, and then you can put that into Canva and use that as part of your texture, like your background, and then you can use it for like your frames, you know, whatever you want to do, and that way, you know, it's kind of themed for whatever you're trying to do. So maybe you'll have another page. And then I'll save this for later. I'm not going to do anything with it now, but you might use this texture as part of your overlay, so that you can, you know, make it sort of kind of matches. And I wouldn't have this decal in here, but you kind of would have a little bit more of the color profile. And then when you want to do stuff with this, it will help blend in with the Fantasy Grounds if you want that look. If you want it more themed and kind of dialed in. The other thing you can do is change the color of your dice to kind of help keep that continuity. But let me shut up for a minute and go to Assets. And whenever you add stuff to Fantasy Grounds, you want to make sure that, in this case, this is going to be an image. So I'm going to click on Images and then click on Folder. And I'm going to drag my new background thing that I made into that. So here is I believe this is the WebM. Nope, that's the PNG. Here we go. Here's the WebP. Okay, so there's that. Looks pretty good. That's preview. And now whenever you change, rename, move stuff around, you hit this thing here, this refresh assets. And now there's a folder called campaign. And here's a preview of that image. Now you can make a quick map. You can share it with your players, set the background, or create a map record. In this case, this would be for the background. So there we go. So that's kind of how you would do that. It turned out pretty good. Like, it's not bad, but I really think if I would have thought about this ahead of time, is I would have overlaid this onto this background here in Canva, and that would have blended in so nicely. It would have been almost seamless, because I could have taken a screenshot essentially of this entire background and then use this to overlay on top of that, and then use that as a decal. And it would kind of blend in. So you could do stuff like that, but I think it's good enough. You can kind of get overboard too. So for like the dice, for instance, and this whole show here is about kind of making your stream look halfway decent, you know, instead of just kind of thrown together. And it does take a little time, but once you get used to it, it's not bad. So what I'm going to do is for the body color, I'm going to use the eyedropper and just kind of go around these colors here and see if I want any of these. So maybe, so here's the dice color, and then for the text, oops, you got to say OK. I forgot to do that. So here's the dice color. You have to click OK, or it won't change it. And then for text, I want to play around with. It's got to be lighter, so maybe that for text. There we go. So it kind of helps theme it to whatever you have going on. And then, of course, you can play with, you know, what design. That's not too bad. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so, you know, it would work. So it kind of helps bring out whatever it is you're trying to do. Let's see what this looks like. No, I don't like that. Don't like that. Yeah, I kind of like the more of these symmetric, like, you know, like this stuff here. There we go. Looks all right. Or you can leave them solid so it's a little bit more obvious. But that's basically a good way. And imagine taking this and then like this overlay that I have around the screen here, and then adding that in, and it just would look so good. And we'll do that tomorrow. I'll leave it like this, and tomorrow I'll start importing the stat blocks for the Necro Sisters together in that, and then we'll see. But I made like a kind of like a little scene with it, because I'm gonna do a social media post later. But I took the sisters and combined them into a picture, and then use that for like social media thing. So let me see if I can go back to. Let's go back to Canva. Let's see. Yeah, this right here. So I took this and kind of made this out of it, put this little skull here. And then this is kind of the attitude of the sisters. You know, they get along, but they have their own ambitions and such. And they're both kind of like, she's a what do you call it, a sorceress, and she's a warlock. So they both have differences. They have different moms. They have the same dad. The dad was a necromancer wizard type. But anyways, I got this whole story and everything that goes with it. So this thing here is pretty in depth. Like, I'm not going to go through that right now. I'll do a little bit tomorrow. But basically, like, there's their stat blocks, and I've got all this stuff in here about their background, their history, the story. That's like how their father died, and he has them both preparing so that he can turn into a lich. So he passed away, but he left a will. He left them this estate and everything. Witherbloom Estate is what it's called. And then it's just really cool. But anyway, so these are just how I created that. And then Enigmatic pet composition. What's that? Oh, that's just a Dark Sisters Unleashed. So, anyways, you get the idea. Like, there's a whole backstory on this, and I mean, you can see it just goes forever. But there's some cool stuff. Like, they both had boyfriends at one time. Like, here's like I made like this family crest. So I'm gonna take that, put that inside Fantasy Grounds, and then there's some other stuff like the estate. I think I made that a pretty cool stab at the estate, like what it looks like. But let's see, where did that go? Yeah, something like this, where the estate where they live, and they're going to be doing a ritual for their father because he died essentially, and they're going to help him become a lich. And then they have their mothers that are both undead, their spirits kind of haunting the house, and then they have a pair of Rottweiler dogs that were pets that had lived past their prime. So when they were put down, they were actually resurrected as zombie kind of guard dogs. And then there's a raven that sticks around here that's kind of trapped, and that was one of the housemaids. And one of the moms got pissed off when she was alive and changed the maid into this like raven, and it was kind of like a curse kind of thing. Like she's stuck in that form. Unless someone has a wish spell or a way to break the magic, but there's all kinds of weird lore going on with this. So I'll get into that more tomorrow. But I wanted to just show you this kind of the process, like making all this stuff, and then like they both dated these two. Like one of them was going out with a vampire guy, and the other was going out with a Cambion demon. Both of them were using them, of course. So Cassiel is one of them, and Zephyrus is the vampire. And they kind of learned their lesson. It's like their first boyfriends kind of thing. So the Witherbloom sisters, the Necro sisters is what they are. And they basically, I'm going to build their stat blocks and everything. And the end goal is to create content. So if you want to run an adventure, you kind of have this whole thing. You got the stream kit, you got the NPCs ready to go, you got the artwork, you kind of got everything there, and you just got to plug in the rule set. So if you want to use different rule set, you don't have to use D&D, but you'll have all the assets kind of thing, and that's what takes the most time anyways usually. Stat blocks you'd have to do separately, but if you're going to use D&D, I already got that figured out where you just copy and paste that in here. But yeah, I'll get into the more of the story elements tomorrow. This is just kind of a setup. But anyhow, hopefully that's helpful to you. It'll make your streams look kind of neat and not so generic, and just really going for it, making stuff like this and making your own. And it's kind of a mix between AI, creativity, having access to these assets, having the programs, like I did this one for Heckna. It turned out really good. Like it did this one the other day. So these are just, stuff that I was building the other day in Canva. So these turn out pretty good without having a art degree and a huge commission that takes a year. This is going to satisfy what I need. So that's the main reason I use AI, because I don't want to wait a year for all this stuff. Anyway, so this is just a kind of a way to make things creatively and match your media and make things fun for you. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully it inspires you. At the end of this video, I put all the links to the programs and the websites I'm using. And then, of course, we have our social media. And, support us if you want. If you don't want to, that's fine. You hate AI, that's fine. I don't care. Whatever. But hopefully this helps you, inspire you, create better content. And also, be afraid to play around with this kind of stuff and make your own. Especially if you're going to be streaming online. It's kind of nice to have some stuff to use. And if you guys want something made, particularly, and you need it really bad, you can PM me and I will make you something. I can't guarantee you how quickly I can do it. This only took me about a day to put all this stuff together. I mean, the story, everything. And that's the power of having the AI, is it really does speed things up, and you're not waiting on commissions and buying a bunch of art assets and all kinds of crap. That's where it gets expensive. And to what end? You're using it for a personal game. So I mean, I don't see any harm in that. Now, if you're going to sell it, that might be a different thing. But anyways, get a hold of me if you need me. I'll be around. Fantasy Grounds Academy.